Dear friends in Christ, you know, as the letter of St. Peter tells us, that you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts and deeds of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were no people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, as we just heard, but now we have received mercy. Amen. Just words I hadn't planned to say, but in response to Lamont's introduction to the installation this morning, he talked about tradition as that which invites change and helps us recognize habits and patterns that give us direction in our lives. I remember, for some reason, the book was tremendously important for me, and it talked about tradition, a book entitled Competent Ministry, written many years ago by Mark Rausch, where he talked about tradition, and he said tradition is like water. He said it can either be in a body that has either no springs, no inlets, or no outlets, and we know what happens to that water, or it can be like water in the river, such as the one we have just to my left down here. I think there's a river there, isn't there? Yeah, there's a river. I saw some people down there, some boats, a bridge. And so I think, I like to think of tradition as that water which flows and is fresh and stays alive and gives life. And I know that that's an understanding of tradition which has marked your life here at Trinity. And I want you to know that that's my understanding of tradition as well, that it needs to be examined and re-examined and the truth of it claimed, so that the gospel which it may carry indeed can be carried and give us life. I know also that over your rich lifetime of service and mission here at Trinity, you have been about building. Much has been built, as you know, and some is yet to be built. And I know that there have been some dreams of building which weren't realized, and maybe not yet have been realized, but may well be able to be in God's future realized. As to the bricks and the mortar, we know that they are one kind of building, aren't they? Today we focus on a different kind of building, the kind that St. Paul invites us to claim, even these many centuries after his initial challenge to the congregation at Corinth. And those of you that were here last Sunday heard Pastor Stephanie talk about that text from St. Paul to the Corinthians. We talked about Paul and Apollos planting and watering for the building of the kingdom. I want to begin my journey in faith with you by thanking you for the opportunity to walk together in this time that is God's gift to all of us, myself included. This in-between time, the important moment in our church's life, but also we know those in-between times in our personal lives are critical to our ability to embrace the future which comes after. So thank you for the opportunity, for this ministry that God has set before us. And we have heard the words this morning at the drive-in. We sang them from the preacher in Ecclesiastes. There's a season and a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up what was planted. And you know those couplets all the way through that third chapter of Ecclesiastes. And I want to focus on the fact that this too, today, this beginning, this segment of this interim period for Trinity is yet God's time, here and now, with us and for us. Over 35 years of specialized ministry, that's been my internal call. Each time I have begun an interim pastorate with a congregation, and there have been over 30 of them. A reminder to me it is that it is God's time, not mine, but God's time. And God's time for all of us is right now, isn't it? ELCA pastor and consultant Roy Oswald tells of the childhood experience of being let off the bus in the rural country and yet needing to walk a good distance to get to his home. He knew what he wanted to do when he got home. In order to get home as fast as possible, though, to do what he wanted to do, he decided to cross the field, the farm field, and to run. The field was not devoid of danger. In his counseling work with hundreds of congregations, our ELCA brother Roy Oswald is quick to remind each of those congregations of the cost of running through the thistles. For when he did get home, he was in no shape to do what he had originally intended to do. There was some blood on his calves and on his feet. You know what they come from. There is a season and a time. You don't harvest before the crop is ripe. You don't plant until the ground is ready to receive the soil. A time to claim this time, this is for us, as God's time. And therein lies the blueprint of how we shall steward this gift of time here and now. After all, isn't a steward primarily a manager of time and many, many other things? 1 month after I finished a 22-month interim at Normandale Lutheran Church in Edina, I returned to attend the funeral of the wife of one of my pastoral colleagues there. Jack, a member of the congregation who happened to have been a college classmate of mine in a town south of here, about 40 miles on the Cannon River, some of you have been there, came up to me following the service, and he said, "Paul, I just realized now, after you've been gone, what your role was as our senior pastor, as our interim senior pastor." He said, "You were a management consultant for us." Well, I hadn't thought of it that way before, but I got to thinking about that and realized that while there's a management component in all work, certainly in the interim period, it's about helping us as congregations, anxious and willing to embrace the future, to know that there's an order, there's a process, there's a time to begin to look at this and this and this, and maybe leave some things behind that we don't have to look at and examine. So it was about helping to manage the use of that time. A role that is mine, at least, of tilling and planting and cultivating the soil in what is an emotional and a spiritual field, so that this field, this faith field here at Trinity Lutheran Church, may be ready for a new review, a new view of our vision, and new pastoral approaches to ministry and lay ministry as well. Stewardship, management, decision-making, acting responsibility in the use of the gifts that we have been given, so that in this case, the next long-term pastor here at Trinity can arrive with the knowledge that his or her gifts can be fully utilized by you who are the members and friends of this congregation. The interim, then, is about our many stewarding responses to the change that the loss of a leader brings. Here at Trinity, this interim is about our collective response to the loss of more than just one pastoral leader, isn't it? And the loss of faithful lay leaders figures in as well, doesn't it? Our response to these multiple changes is the transition. The transformation that we seek is indeed that gift that God gives, that Easter morning surprise of the empty tomb. That's God's work, and that will be God's work here as well. I also lift up this in-between time that reminds us of that walk of those two Easter Monday disciples from Jerusalem to Emmaus. Puzzled they were until they were joined by the third walker, and until they sat down, as you know, at a table for eating and drinking together. They recognized him and realized who had been with them and what had happened in that time of uncertainty and confusion and puzzlement and surprise. He was indeed the one who raised a new temple in 3 days. It was true. So, what then is Apollos? What is Paul, as we heard last Sunday? I ask, what is David? What is Sarah? What is Jill? What is Dan? What is Kathy? What is Kevin? What is Ron? What are you in this in-between time? These days, these weeks, these months, after not one, not two, but soon 3 pastors will have heard the Lord's call to a new future, a new ministry of the Lord's choosing, and have moved from this congregation's service. What are you after other servants, other members of this faith fellowship have left, after their vineyard workday is complete? Paul is right. All of these and countless other followers of Jesus are servants who have walked with you in the formation of your faith, no matter how long that walk was. A faith that is daily the substance, the heart of, the spiritual center of those things that you hope for in your life. Things for you, things for others. Good health, willingness to forgive, the desire to understand, the courage to trust, and the patience to endure all things, to bear all things, to believe all things, and probably most important, as Paul says, to hope all things. These things, the marvelous capacities of love. These things, the building blocks laid upon the foundation of Jesus Christ, the one Lord who walks every step of the way with us. So then what is Christ's body here today? What do the ministers look like? Also the pastors. What is it that Christ is calling us to be and to do now, even in the midst of our losses, in the midst of our uncertainties, in the midst of our challenges in this post-resurrection walk with Jesus? And what of the mission of the church as we know it? Called to be faithful in an increasingly divided, war-torn, hungry, and terrorized world. As you read in the last Trinity today, Mark Allen Powell has proclaimed that it is not so much that the church has a mission, but that the mission has a church. And we are one of the congregations of that church. Northeast Michigan Synod Bishop Craig Satterley has said recently, "As I watch the evening news, I am convinced that the world needs the gospel. It's so much more urgent than the institutional church." As far as I know, it's still there, right in front of you as you face the wall and descend the steps at Gullickson Hall on the campus of Luther Seminary. Those bold words atop the board say, "The field is the world." Yes, it is true, and it is the place where we are called to give service. A world without boundaries, in a world that is increasingly complex and pluralistic, and yet we come claiming the gift of the gospel as we understand it through the words of Luther, as we anticipate the 500th anniversary of the Reformation of 1517. So then, dear friends, as we move forward together in this critical moment for ministry, let us do so committed to the ministry of offering mutual support, of listening with understanding, of believing without fully seeing, and of forbearing one another, learning anew the incredible power of the love of our Lord Jesus. Where fear has captured a central space in the lives of many of us, in the Church of Jesus Christ, let us now move forward, believing and living the conviction that love casts out fear. Ministry at best is about the quality of the encounter, one-on-one, and not so much about the quantity of our accounting of time. Jesus was always on the move, wasn't he? May we then together in this God-given time be wise and faithful stewards of this season, this time. Our transition team, which will be coming soon, will guide us along with our council and our staff members, and each of you in your words, in your questions, in your affirmations of ministry. My prayer is that we may grow and that we may prosper as we work to care for those for whom the Lord lived and died, and then rose victorious in that transformation that we all seek. By his amazing grace, we are his risen body, aren't we? Easter people. We are his urgent mission. We are his changing church in what remains the Father's world. We can believe and we can know by faith that his deep and abiding love for us endures forever. He is the cornerstone of the foundation for we who are the living stones, the church. Because of him, this communion of saints is built to last. That's good news. Amen.